Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, at last, Thursday, June 9th, 2022. Time for another show, but time for a show counting down the hours, I guess at this point, to the first of the January 6th committee hearings. That's the PSA for today. You can watch them at 8 p.m. prime time, 7 Central. I don't know why they never continue with that, but I guess the local affiliate stations that would be broadcasting this would probably only reach into the Central Time Zone anyway. Why they don't continue on to say 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific, I have no idea. But I guess the other affiliates would take care of that. You're barely off from work on the West Coast, although you are off from work, hopefully. Well, most people probably don't even actually wind up at 5 o'clock these days. Anyway, they squeeze extra hours out of us through wage theft and various other little accounting tricks that get more out of us in return for less pay. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the fact that tonight's homework assignment, I guess, to watch these hearings. I still have some doubts about whether or not I'm going to be able to get that onto the television in the main television viewing area in our home. I might be forced to a side room or something like that, back up to the bedroom or something like that to watch the hearings. And I'm thinking about the reality of watching the opening speeches and wondering whether I'll be doing that live or directly, or watching Twitter watch it and comment upon it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But at any rate, some excitement on tap for tonight. And then the big battle between the hopeful folks, the optimists, the cynics both among Democratic faithful who really and truly believe that everybody should be paying attention to this thing, but probably won't because that's the way we are in this country, versus the press cynics who just will say, well, people aren't going to be interested in this. And that's that, and write their pieces about it. We'll have to endure that, but there should be a pretty compelling narrative laid out tonight, and all the stories leaked so far are a pretty compelling narrative, too. It will be interesting to see whether they can weave them together in a way that captures the attention of the country. If you don't want your attention captured, of course, there's other things to do. Bill tweets this morning, a little switcheroo in the morning tweet. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, and Kagro X reminds you that the highlight on TV tonight is Space Seed, the Star Trek episode that introduced us to the villainous Khan. Oh, yes, there will be live tweeting. So I guess if you just can't take the January 6th hearings, you can watch Star Trek with Bill this evening. That's happening. No stopping it. Okay, let's see. Plenty of things to catch up on today, of course. Lots of suggestions for different directions to go. We still have Friday, of course. We'll want to wrap up tonight's hearings, but also do our regular Friday roundup of all the other things that are going on. And, well, gee whiz, there's just so much. Let's see. Oh, I should have checked in with the coronavirus update. Things had just ticked up slightly in Loudoun County yesterday. Yeah, and back up to the 180s, but that's not so bad. And the hospitalization rates remain pretty good. It's been fairly good news in a lot of places, although they still can't seem to tamp this stuff out in Europe. And of course, we here in the United States are still reporting among the most cases, raw numbers of cases each day, and I think we're probably reporting, far fewer, I would say, than half of positives actually making it into the statistics at any given time as people home test, feel okay, and that's thanks to the widespread administration of the vaccine, feel fine, fight through it as a cold, stay home, do self-tests, don't bother telling anybody about it, except, I guess, folks at work, when you say, I'll be back in a couple of days after I shake this thing. All right, well, Greg Dworkin is here, having collected a raft of stories. If you want to give another plug for the time and and channels for the hearings, that's fine. We should do that all day long. So otherwise,
8
good
p.m.
morning.
Eastern Time, 7
Yes.
Central.
That is correct.
Alexander
And,
Vindman says it's must-watch TV.
Oh, hey. All right.
You would know.
Yeah, that's true. And he's in the military where there's a lot of must-everythings.
Well, he was. I don't know.
That's true.
If he still
Now
is.
he's free. Yes. As a civilian, he's very loosey-goosey. He has long hair and a mustache. I don't know.
Right. Speaking of COVID, a
He
couple
could.
of updates there.
Yes.
Moderna says that they have a new booster coming out in the fall, which includes Omicron and should be better than the boosters that they've had up till now.
All right.
And
That sounds like a good
little
idea.
kid vaccines missed their time frame. They missed their
what?
opportunity, but they're coming too. So under 5 vaccines should be here soon. And, it's the kind of thing where people just need to do it rather than talk about it. So if you have the availability and you're waiting,
I'm waiting.
to vaccinate your little kids,
Oh, no.
it's possible
No.
to do now. And, somehow, having vaccines under the radars is in some ways better than just having it front page news all the time, which just sparks controversy and stupid protests. Just do it.
Yeah, right. I haven't seen anybody get in their truck and drive across country to be angry lately.
Well, yeah, because they haven't worked.
Yeah. I mean, they did do that.
By the way,
again.
those same
They did-
people are
they did
like
show up.
doing 1776,
Cool.
don't tread on me stuff now. So, it's pretty obvious where all that stuff came from. But it's, it's a question, follow the money, and it's a question where the funding's coming from.
Yeah.
If you don't steal it, where did it go and where did it come from?
They got people. I think they finally broke up that. I think the second round of the D.C. trucker protest collapsed before they even really did anything in the D.C. area over controversy over the money. The participants were pretty sure that the organizers were living it up on donations. And,
Well, they probably were.
Yeah, I think they bought themselves some luxury RVs to hang out in, and the truckers, I guess, they're used to sleeping in their trucks fairly often, but not when the other guys are having a grand old time. And I
don't remember your basic truck on the road towing an RV so that they can sleep.
Right, not the way they usually work. So. Anyway, it's good. They never really did anything. They didn't even block traffic in the D.C. area. Not that anyone would notice blocking traffic in the D.C. area. That just looks like traffic. So.
Right. So, it is Thor's Day today, Cheney's
Yes,
Hammer
welcome,
Day.
Thor.
So before we get to the January 6th stuff, which I think is going to dominate the news, let's talk about a few lightning round things. First of all,
Yes.
I think I mentioned yesterday that the Pennsylvania Senate race has been settled. Not only did McCormick concede,
yes.
but the recount showed that Oz won by pretty much the same amount he won the first time. And the
So you got
Philadelphia
it right.
Inquirer has this important article. The Pennsylvania Senate race recount is complete, and results show how accurate the vote count was.
Da-da-da-da.
But
The
you won't
great
hear
and
about that
powerful
from
Oz.
Republicans because it's only accurate if a Republican wins.
Well,
If a
they
Democrat
did,
wins, then
sort of.
obviously it was fraud.
Right. This was a primary, so they don't have an answer for that. It might be accurate, it might not. It depends on whether Trump's guy wins, I guess. I don't know.
Right. Speaking of elections, in France, the French legislative elections are in 4 days. This hasn't gotten nearly as much attention as the presidential elections for a variety of reasons. Presidential elections usually dominate the news, but it's in this case the opponent, the right-wing Marie Le Pen
her.
group, is not expected to win. So the latest polls have Macron's group at the 28%, and the left-wing coalition, which many people expect to win, at 27.5%. So margin of error there, you don't really know who's ahead. And then they have 25% for the far right. So that's more than 80% of voting intentions, but that leaves 20% or so, a little bit less than that, undecided, or at least not answering the polls. And so, they expect maybe less than half of the country will participate in these because it's not really clear what any of it means. And so that's where that stands. So in England, Boris Johnson is still on life support, and the British papers aren't cutting him any slack, and now they're talking about going into recession and Brexit failing. And they haven't addressed that, and they need to address that. And until they do, Nothing's going to happen. I think there was, I didn't see it, but I read online that there was a Brexiteer who wrote a op-ed in the Times, formerly the Times of London, about how things need to be adjusted because it's not working the way they thought.
I wonder what they thought it was going to work like. I think everybody predicted it pretty accurately. It's generally a good thing for everybody.
No. Britain is so cool that it could just rely on its own, and all that money that is going to the equivalent. It's the equivalent of Texas saying, we send too much money to Washington. We want to keep that money for ourselves. And other red states say, yeah. And then you look and you find that red states actually get more money from the feds than they send.
What are you talking about?
And so if you break away, that money gets cut off, and then you're unhappy because you lost money and you thought you were going to make money. And what did you think this is, NFTs?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not certain what they thought they were getting into. I guess, I don't know, man. Well, who knew? They don't know about this in Britain, but I guess maybe without doing it economically, cutting yourself off from everybody else, you should have looked at the Texas power grid, right? Oh, well, we want to, we don't want to rely on anybody else. We'll make our own power. We'll do it ourselves. We don't want to be integrated. Okay. Do you have enough power? No, we don't. Okay, next year we'll check with you again. You had enough power? No, we don't. How about next year? No, we still don't. All right. Maybe integration? No, we don't want to. All right. Okay.
All right. So I just took a peek at the Times to see what their headlines were. And the top headline there is EU hardens against unserious Johnson on Northern Ireland Protocol. No one in Europe believes him, says the Irish minister.
Okay.
I mean, just to give you an idea how things are going for Johnson.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know.
But, if you read the U.S. press, it's, Johnson survived his no confidence, so everything's fine for him.
The election's over.
No. And then here it is. Painful as it is, we need to talk about Brexit. Johnson and Starmer are both dodging the real issue, compromise with Brussels to improve our trade relationship. In other words, what it turns out is that the Theresa May deal that was rejected is probably better than what the UK actually got. And so some of the conservatives are saying, we have to fix this. And so, again, just to keep in mind, reality is going to catch up with you no matter what. And in that regard, this is a little a tidbit from Germany.
Okay.
Which is reported by Tagesschau, which has a nightly German news show that you could watch online if you happen to speak German, which I don't. But it says, for the first time, a majority of Germans support the stationing of U.S. nuclear weapons in Germany.
Oh.
Particularly strong support among voters of the Green Party.
Well, that took only 60 years.
That took only 60 days. I mean, this is what Putin has done. And again, I talked about this on the show a lot because I do follow what happens in Germany. It's just interesting. And it's a complete reversal of like 50 years of pacifism.
Yeah,
in just a couple of months. And it caught the German prime minister by surprise because Scholz is having trouble keeping up with the German public. And that's especially true because his party's been really, really friendly with Putin, including a former member of that party, Schrader, who was a former prime minister and on the board of the Russian oil and gas giant. So, big findings that are being forced by that. And in that regard, we don't talk about it much. That's because although the U.S. tends to talk about it when they cover it as a stalemate in Ukraine, that's not what's going on at all. There's brutal street fighting in the Donetsk area, Severodonetsk in particular, that looked like at the beginning of June that was part of the implacable, unstoppable Russian juggernauts going to just roll into this. It turns out they couldn't. They did things the Russian way, which is to really not think about what they were doing, just rush in and declare victory because it was good news back home. And that allowed the Ukrainians to position themselves for counterattacks, which have been quite effective. They've taken back 50% of that city, and they're slugging it out. And basically, they're chewing up the Russians. They're having their own losses, too. And so, yes, the city's getting destroyed. Yes, Ukrainians are taking casualties. but the Russians are taking tremendous casualties, and they simply are not going to be able to sustain what they're doing. Have you read this before? I mean, this is Battle of Kiev, Battle of Kharkiv. I mean, it's not sustainable. So the people who are analyzing this from the military side are just pointing out that this is, still critical. It's probably the most critical battle of the war at this point, because that's where Russian forces are concentrated. But it's not going that well for them.
No. Well,
that's not stalemate.
Yeah. Well, although there's two kinds of stalemates: the kind where everybody is exhausted and doesn't fight one another, and the kind where there's just the same amount of people getting killed on both sides, and no territory is changing hands, and it's very bloody and deadly. That's a stalemate too, I guess. Although it doesn't feel very stale while you're involved in it. At any rate, So, well, they continue to pound one another there, and a lot of it's ugly, and I don't know, it's odd.
A lot of ugly.
A lot, and as you mentioned, the usual MO for the Russians is to roll through everything, and then we found out they had no tires, and you can't roll at all.
You can't roll back.
Yeah,
then you get
roll
caught
forward, can't roll. That's a stalemate.
We'll cross
too.
the river. Well, what are you going to do when you get to the other side of the river? Well, we'll figure that out when we get there.
Yeah,
okay. Well, now you cross the river, and the Ukrainians blew up your bridge, and so you're stuck on this side, and you have no support, and you're going to get slaughtered. Well, we didn't think of that.
Right. Well, from the Moscow perspective, they probably tell the troops, I don't know, hey, quit if you want to. Build a house, stay there, and then declare the area Russian.
Yeah, declare that you're on vacation.
Right. Look, half the population of this area is Russian ethnically, so we should annex it.
Right. So now we're going to turn to the big story of the day, which, by the way, will be on primetime viewing, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, on any channel except Fox, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. Right. But this piece is from the Boston Globe. The January 6 hearings are must-see TV. Will America tune in? It's not political theater.
Must.
For anybody who cares about our beleaguered nation, now is not the time to move on and tune out, writes Renee Graham.
Okay.
But, it's interesting because one of the ways you learn to hate the political press, hate them, despise them, loathe them, is when they start writing articles like, nobody cares about January 6th, but we'll cover this anyway. That's what Politico did this morning.
Oh, well, it's easy to hate them.
Well, I don't know who you mean by nobody cares, but we'll see. We'll see. 17 months ago this week, democracy almost died, says the Globe article, spurred by white supremacy and the unconstitutional machinations of a bitter loser and his co-conspirators. A violent mob attempted to overturn the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. And by the way, that's what the framing should be tonight. On Thursday, the House Select Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 insurrection will make its prime-time television debut.
Yay.
According to Axios, the committee reportedly enlisted James Goldston, a former ABC News president, to bring some polish to at least half a dozen congressional TV hearings that'll attempt to lay out for viewers what its members have learned about who was involved with the planning and execution of the deadly breaching of the U.S. Capitol in 2021. So some of it's going to sound like a trial. It's not a trial, but it'll be like, here's what we present to the jury in our opening argument. And like a trial, the other side has a chance to respond, but not according to how they want to do it. It has to be according to rules that you and the judge set. In this particular case, because Kevin McCarthy, who's as dumb as a post, decided not to participate in this, there are no Jim Jordans to take the jacket off, jump on the table, and say, look at that squirrel over there. So it's going to be what the committee wants you to see.
Well, good.
And not only that, it's going to be the way the committee wants you to see it. Oh, look, they're using professionals to put on a professional. That must mean it's all political theater. Well, no.
Well, people appreciate political theater. So,
well, if you do it well, then what it is it's a narrative. And so narrative is important. Well, since last year, says the Globe, the committee has interviewed more than 1,000 people and analyzed more than 125,000 documents. They're expected to disclose some of those findings on TV, where witnesses will also be called to testify under oath, although probably not tonight. I don't know that, but I'm guessing tonight's narrative. In a Pew Research poll released last month, 70% of Americans called inflation this nation's biggest problem. Of course, that's not surprising, but nobody on the list said the ongoing threat of democracy was tops, or for that matter, voting rights. So either Americans have extraordinary confidence in the durability of this nation's founding principles, which is true, or their attention spans are egregiously shorter than anybody dared imagine, which is also true. The unconscionable truth is many Americans seem to have forgotten about what millions witnessed. It's a good way to remind people. So it wasn't a spontaneous riot. It wasn't legitimate political discourse, which is what the Republican committee said. It was a planned insurrection, and it's important to drive that home tonight. Greg Sargent writes, Fox News' blackout of January 6 points to a hidden crisis for Democrats, which is to say they simply don't have their own propaganda network. And, also points out that part of the issue here is that what Fox does is legitimize a point of view, which then infects the rest of the so-called legitimate press, because they feel like they have to be fair and cover both sides, and that includes whatever Fox News says. So you don't have the same kind of pushback that blogs like Daily Kos will give you. Like, this is bullshit. You shouldn't be saying that. They don't do that.
They don't. They should.
They should. Fun, and by the way, this should be the end of anybody thinking Fox News is a legitimate news organization. They're still they're pervasive. Well, during the day they do news with people like Chris Wall. Oh, he's not there anymore. Or Shep, other people who used to be good but aren't. Shep Smith. Well, he's not there anymore. Right. But at night they do opinion.
Yeah, I guess so. But
during the day they only
still
do
that, right? People keep saying you kick them out of press conferences. They're respectable journalists, very highly respected. So
you could see them with the question that Peter Doocy asks every day.
Right. Yeah, highly
kick
respected.
Out. I mean,
you're a moron.
If you're a propaganda outlet, why are you getting credentialed?
Well, they've been doing that for a long time. Well, on the Republican side, of course. But, even when you expose it as pure propaganda and nothing else, or how many television channels, like sort of pseudo-television channels of the Republicans have now? One American News, and they got, I forget all the other
Russia
ones.
Today.
Oh, sure. And then Lindell has his own, Lindell TV. I don't know what, Pillow Channel or whatever.
Right.
There's a million of them, and no one has done this. No one has done this for.
So the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, because the real news actually is compelling despite all of that. All January 6th committee is going to hear from Brad Raffensperger and Gene Sterling. And in case you don't remember who Gene Sterling was,
I do.
Gabriel Sterling, sorry.
I don't.
Gabriel Sterling was the voting system implementation manager.
Rod Sterling.
Rod Sterling.
Okay.
I
remember he was the guy. He got mad.
Oh, that was Gene Roddenberry. Now, this is Gabriel Sterling. Issued this prescient warning to President Trump on December 1st, a month before the insurrection. Stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get shot. Somebody's going to get killed, he said.
Yes, I remember that. I didn't realize it was
We're doing our job. Leave us alone. So with news that Georgia Republicans Brad Raffensperger and Gabe Sterling are slated to testify, said Ryan Goodman, a lawyerly law guy, shortly before Sterling's remarks, quote, people who identified themselves to police as Oath Keepers, a far-right militia group that supported Trump's bid to overturn the election, were found outside Raffensperger's home. The writing was on the wall. Former White House official, Vice President Advisor Olivia Troy, on December 28th, 2020, I'm actually very concerned there's going to be violence on January 6th because the president is encouraging it.
What do you know?
And then so AJC has that. So again, It's important to frame the
I've been framed.
Supporters of people like Roger Stone as what they are, militias. Right? And you can argue about, is it a militia or is it a magazine or a clip? You have to identify these gangs, these thugs, these black and brown shirts as what they are.
Let's.
Well, that starts tonight.
All right. I like it. I like the hanging that name on them, that they are street gangs. And I mean, the Proud Boys happily admit as much. So they're malicious.
And so, to me, what's going to happen, if you want to, cut it to the chase here, what should happen is that the Proud Boys were enlisted by Roger Stone on behalf of Donald Trump, who knew about it, and encouraged them to go and be part of the insurrection. That's what I'm waiting to hear tonight.
I hope so, because I mean that's certainly been everybody's conclusion that's been paying attention and watching.
Just say it, and then give us the evidence over the next few days.
Yeah.
Without Mark Meadows, January 6th might never have happened, says the New Yorker. So none of this Ryan Zinke rehab stuff Ronnie Jackson was just a misguided doc in the military. Without Mark Meadows, January 6th might never have happened. Trump's fourth and final White House chief of staff served as the matador for the former president's election lies, writes Susan Glasser. When the House Select Committee investigating January 6th begins its long-awaited hearings on Thursday night, that would be 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central.
Really?
No witness will have been more helpful and more confounding than Mark Meadows.
Yeah, without having said anything.
Well, in general, the chief of staff runs the country. That's true for just about every president.
Yeah.
You could argue that, they get the direction from the CEO, who's the president, but they're the chief operating officer, and they make everything happen. Think Ehrlichman and especially Haldeman during Nixon. Yeah, Nixon was running things, but he depended upon Haldeman to get it done.
Yeah, Meadows not really great at that either.
Well, but the point is they have great power while under a president, and how you use that power, whether it's like the conservative generals who said, we're taking these jobs, McMaster or whoever's in the Department of Defense, and say we're going to be there to put a check on what he's trying to do. And other chiefs of White House chiefs of staff could, in theory, be in that position because they're the ones that filter information in terms of what gets to him.
Yeah.
Of course, in Trump's case, he got it through his kids too, so it didn't work quite the same way.
Yes, but now some of his kids are appalled at what they gave him.
Yes, because it's interfering with their dinner appointments they might want to get these days.
Right. So, or whether their grand tours of the Middle East to collect another $1 billion.
Right. Anyway, Meadows gave the committee thousands of text messages. We're going to hear something tonight.
They've been leaking out or being reported out slowly. They are disastrous, as was he.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Have we proven the conspiracy yet? It's not. No, not yet. Wait. 8, 7 Central on all networks except Fox. Don't forget to tune in. I'm making my plans.
Exactly right. This is Susan Glasser, who reminds us that she wrote a book with Peter Baker, who, when it comes to politics, is a complete jerk.
Wow.
And, I say that advisedly from having read him.
All right.
But,
what more can you do?
I'm not saying nasty things about your husband, Susan. It's just he's a both sides-er. So many times over the past few months, while writing a book with my husband, Peter Baker, about Trump's presidency and contemplating its violent, hard to believe end, I got stuck on this question. There's no doubt that Trump himself bears responsibility for his reckless pursuit of the rigged election, fever dream. An assault on one of the most important foundations of American democracy, which Trump personally began laying the groundwork for months before the election had taken place. But the record is equally clear that Meadows never shut down Trump's inflammatory claims, and Meadows still refuses to disavow them, creating a sharp contrast with other important Trump advisors, Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel who reportedly served as an important internal challenge to the false election claims, Bill Barr, the staunchly pro-Trump attorney general who finally broke with him over the election lies. Now, giving Bill Barr credit gives you an idea what I'm talking about in terms of both sidesing stuff.
Finally broke.
Barr is not respectable.
No.
I don't know, why they even take that. Well, compared to,
you know why?
The Proud Boys, that's
the foundation.
The Barr you're comparing it to.
Yeah, the foundation was laid for them by a number of ostensibly liberal legal commentators who, upon his nomination, said, well, the thing about Bill Barr is he's a straight shooter, and they gave him all the cover that they needed.
And an institutionalist.
And now
just like Brett
Peter
Kavanaugh.
Baker gets to continue to run with that. Post-insurrection, they're still saying, well, he left right before the insurrection. Yeah, because he knew it was going to happen, and rather than do something, he said, I don't want anybody to blame me for it, so I'll leave.
Or, of course, Mike Pence, writes, this slavishly loyal vice president who did everything that Trump asked him to do for 1,447 days before reaching the line he couldn't cross.
And desperately trying to cross it, too.
In our new book, The Divider, Trump in the White House, 2017-2021, which will be available 8 p.m., 7 Central.
Yeah, they give you all the details.
Will be published in September. My husband and I write that Meadows played a double game, the likes of which had rarely been seen, even in the swamps of Washington. He told both sides what they wanted to hear. Talk about the ultimate both sides, or no wonder they write a book about him.
Yeah.
He reassured establishment Republicans he was trying to keep the president from going too far, and he gave conspirators access to the Oval Office to whisper, you really won, don't give up. That's the thing. He's the gatekeeper in terms of who gets in. So if Mike Lindell wants to talk to Trump, Meadows lets him in.
Yeah, I find that
right?
puzzling.
If Navarro wants to talk to Trump, then Meadows lets him in.
Yes. Even Sydney, what's her name?
Powell,
the crazy one, who got notes. But under no circumstances are you to let her in to see the president.
Or Cleta, whatever her name is.
Cleta
all the nutty lawyers.
Right.
Or Lynn, the other nutty lawyer. Lynn Wood. Yeah. Meadows acted less as a gatekeeper than as a door opener. Meadows is basically a matador. A Republican involved in discussions with the White House at the time told us. He sort of just let anybody and everybody who wanted to come in.
I don't see the metaphor in matador, but okay. Like, right. Are they thinking matador like, well, the matador gets out of the way of the bull? Not really. All right.
No, so Meadows told people like Mitch McConnell, trust me, I'm going to get the president there. He's going to drop this issue. And while he was doing that, he was letting the crazies into the office.
Yeah.
So that's, again, ought to be prominent. So Meadows is going to be one of the key figures tonight that's really, really worth watching in terms of how they present him. And then Rick Hasson has a piece which is more scholarly and erudite, which isn't what we need right now, but is still true.
Okay.
I mean, the country needs it, but that's not what the narrative people need tonight. That's for the last night. The January 6th committee should be looking ahead to election threats in 2024, establishing what happened so you can fix vulnerabilities in the system. That's supposedly been one of the dust-ups on the committee between the Democrats who want to look to how to prevent this from happening again, and Lynn Cheney and the Republicans who want to go after Trump because he was the one that did this. And it's not like it's either or. You have to do both. But there's no question in terms of dramatic narrative, Cheney's, going to be the lead, at least at the beginning of the hearings.
Yeah.
And then toward the end, you could do the Rick Hasson thing and let Carolyn Maloney and some of the other people do, here's what we need to do in future.
I'll agree. And I think that's a fine plan. It can't all be done at once, and you're just going to have to do it piece by piece. And tonight, everyone would like to hear the story of January 6th. Now I remember why Peter Baker was on my mind, as he did the Jared Kushner story from yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I really dislike Peter Baker.
I guess.
Really, really dislike him
reason.
As a political reporter. I mean, he makes crooks respectable. That's all you need to know about him.
Yeah, well, that's what he's done here, too. And, I mean, the whole idea of Jared Kushner washing his hands of things, I guess he, just like Bill Barr.
For the 17th time.
They still think that this
If
guy,
Maggie Haberman isn't excusing Ivanka, then it's Peter Baker excusing Jared.
I was very struck by that yesterday when I was reading it, that Baker takes, well, not pains necessarily, but it takes a moment to acknowledge that this idea of Kushner being the moderating force on Trump was obviously a myth that never worked out. But what he seems to ignore is, how did that myth get built
and
up.
What was my role in that?
Yeah, well, that, and the role was he kept talking to people who said that they were close to or friends of Jared and Ivanka, and 25 times they told you that they were going to be the moderating influence, and now you recognize that that was a total myth. But just one more time, for old time's sake, they now say he's washing his hands of the people who lied to me 25 times and caused me now to say that everything they said was a myth. Have one more message for me. And guess what it is? I will reproduce it faithfully for you with no indication that maybe you shouldn't believe it because these people lied to me for 4 years, or I love it. But, oh well, Peter Baker needs to write a story, so I wonder who all these friends of Ivanka and Jared really are.
Yeah, we shall
Everyone
see.
thinks it's Jared and Ivanka.
Yeah.
Okay.
People close to Jared and Ivanka said.
Right. Yeah. I'm close to her. She's close to me. There you go.
Right. I'll tell you about Jared, and she'll tell you
Right.
about
Well, we're not,
me. And
it's not like
these
we're
are people close
self-serving
to us,
jerks.
and that it's the only people that we allow to be close to
Right.
us.
I'm not that stupid. I'm going to let this guy tell
Nobody
you
else really
good
wants to be
things
close to
about
us because, we're not likable people. But
me. Oh, well.
so, changing topics here. Here's something that Fox did cover, and that's the Buffalo Uvalde mass shooting hearings.
Oh, okay.
And Fox News has this piece on Kimberly Rubio, whose daughter was killed in the Uvalde shooting.
Yeah, I wonder.
Saying, we seek a
named
ban on
Rubio is
assault
interested
rifles
in
and
that.
high-capacity magazines. We understand that for some reason, to people with money, to people who fund political campaigns, guns are more important than children. That was on Fox News, which was a good thing to have on Fox News. And there were those hearings. I think at those same hearings, it was the pediatrician from Uvalde who talked about how these guns decapitate children.
Yes, they do.
Again, these are not parents who want pictures of their children circulating.
No, but still
But the description alone is chilling.
Yeah, and there are things you can do with that rhetorically, and
they did.
They did. They did it at the hearings. I saw a clip this morning from what's his name, Lawrence O'Donnell, discussing it. Yeah, the fact that, as they say, decapitating the kids. You know, the force of the guns, it tears them up. And he said if Al Qaeda had done that to American soldiers, Republicans would be willing to wage a war over that. But if you do it in an American classroom, you get inaction, passivity, delay from those very same Republicans. They want to talk about how many doors you should
Faster,
have.
let alone if you do it in a Buffalo supermarket.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is happening, and it would cause you to take the most serious action there could be, war. But, you know, for you, war is a video game, and you're killing brown people over there anyway. So what's the difference? But here in America, like when you wage that war, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, anywhere else, Syria, take your pick, law-abiding citizens in that country pay the price. They get killed. They're deprived for the duration of the war of everything that makes life livable. But who cares because it's happening over there. Here, well, we can't restrict this because law-abiding American citizens will pay the price. You've been making law-abiding citizens of every other country in the world pay the price for your outrage. Why not a little at home, especially if you don't actually kill them? That might be nice, but no.
Right. So
interesting point.
part of the testimony appears to irk Republicans on committee. I think I mentioned this yesterday, but I found the piece where I had read it. Okay. The testimony of Zanita Everhart, whose son was shot but survived the racially motivated shooting in Buffalo. Appeared to irk Republicans on the House Oversight Panel when she began to discuss her belief that America was created on the shoulders of hate and white supremacy that continues to target the black community. Representative Glenn Grothman, Republican, Wisconsin, shifted back in his chair before rolling his eyes. When Everhart discussed education and the need to teach black history, Representative Andrew Clyde, Republican, Georgia, mouthed, "Oh my God." She's talking about critical race theory here.
Right.
Everhart testified for her son, Zaire Goodman. Though he survived, the shooting left him with bullet wounds through his neck, leg, and back. The point here is not to impose a new racial hierarchy, but to remove an existing one. After centuries of waiting for white majorities to overturn white supremacy, because it is to me, it's fallen to black people to do it themselves.
Okay.
They didn't like that.
Well, golly. Yeah, they've whipped themselves into a frenzy over any acknowledgement that there might be, racial inequity in the country. Well, that's CRT. Well, to some extent, yes, you're getting closer, but the real question is it warranted? Because it is.
Because it is.
And
so
you can't get over
Jamie
that.
Dupre, writing up what Congress actually did, said the U.S. House today will vote on a federal red flag law a day after most Democrats and a handful of Republicans voted for a package of gun bills, which included raising the age to 21 to buy an assault weapon. You know, listeners to the show will know that this has been on the table. I told you this was coming.
Yes.
Much more in today's regular order column that he writes. 5 House Republicans voted for the package of gun bills approved last night. Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Gonzalez of Ohio, Jacobs, New York, Kinzinger, Illinois, and Upton, Michigan, and the last 4 there are not running for re-election. 2 Democrats voted no. Jared Golden in Maine and Kurt Schrader of Oregon. Schrader's a dead man walking because he lost his primary. But even after losing, he's just a terrible person because now he doesn't have a political reason to vote against this.
Boo.
Right. And Democrats last night forced votes on the 7 individual sections of their gun package. 10 House Republicans backed the 21-year-old minimum purchase age for assault weapons. Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Gonzalez of Ohio, Jacobs of New York, Katko of New York, Kinzinger, Illinois, Maliotakis, New York, Salazar, Florida. This is the interesting one to me. Chris Smith of New Jersey.
Oh.
We'll talk about him. Turner of Ohio and Upton of Michigan. Now, Chris Smith represents District 4 in New Jersey, which stretches from Asbury Park to Trenton and is adjacent to, but doesn't include McGuire Air Force Base. It's probably the most conservative district in the Northeast in some ways. It's a PVI plus 8 for Trump. That is a partisan voting index, the Cook Report idea of figuring out just how conservative or liberal you are, which party you go to. And you know, it's based on party, but these days it's you know,
and the V
political ideology. So Chris Smith is the head of the I don't know what they call it, the group, the study group for pro-life in Congress, in the House.
Yeah,
he's an incredibly conservative guy representing an incredibly conservative district. He's been there for like 18 years. Yeah, and
maybe
he
longer.
backed the 21-year-old minimum purchase age for assault weapons, which I think is pretty amazing. He's safe.
Yeah, he's kind of an old school-ish conservative Republican guy. I mean, what passes for old school? I mean, it's funny because he wouldn't have said that about him at the beginning of his career. He was an anti-abortion zealot, and he still is. But I will give him this. That still remains his chief issue. He's still a anti-abortion and I don't like taxes guy. And but he lives in New Jersey, which is in the Northeast, and people in New Jersey, conservative though they may be in his district, and even Trumpy though they turned out to be in his district, it's still a northeastern state and adjacent to or easy access both to the urban areas of New York and Philadelphia, and no matter what newspaper you're reading or TV stations you're watching, radio stations you're listening to, you're hearing a lot about gun violence all the time. We're in close proximity there.
He was a surprise vote to me, but you know, that to me just says Republicans are really feeling pressure to do something.
That's true. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a record on this in voting in the past. He has been there for an awfully long time. I think he's probably, you mentioned 18 years, but I think he might.
Something like that.
Might be even more than that. I think he might have been elected.
21st term.
Okay. There you go. Well, yeah. So that's 42 years.
Yeah.
That's quite a long time. He was there a long time when I was
terms,
there.
but it was actually 21 terms.
Yeah. And it wasn't years in each one of those things. Yeah, so he's
in
like
dog years,
elected
he's like 742 years old. He's 69.
Elected in 1980. Okay, so with Ronald Reagan, and then Ronald Reagan has died since. Not Chris Smith. He's still there. He's not nearly as old as Reagan was when he was elected, but you see. By the way, something I had forgotten about, but I now am reminded of in the Wikipedia summary. He's a party switcher. He actually was a Democrat up until 1978 and then switched to Republicans.
Came in the Reagan Revolution. So interesting. He has as
Reagan
you point
Democrat.
out, he has a very interesting voting record on guns.
Yeah.
Okay. In March 17, 2021, he voted against violence against women reauthorization. But March 11, 2021, enhanced background checks. Yes.
Okay.
He was a co-sponsor of the Bipartisan Background Check Act of 2021, as a matter of fact. Stop School Violence Act of 2018, yes. Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act, yes. I don't know what that one was.
I don't remember.
Prohibits District of Columbia from implementing certain firearm laws, yes. Requiring state reciprocity for carrying concealed firearms, yes. Exempting guns from an estate for bankruptcy, yes. So he's got a mixed record, I should say.
Yeah.
But, the older ones are, more pro-gun, and the more recent ones, not so much. For example, in 1999,
all right,
he voted against the 24-hour background check amendment, but voted yes on the 72-hour background check amendment. I mean, so he's not a complete nut job.
Yeah, guns aren't his thing, typically.
And the fact that he voted for enhanced background checks as recently as 2021, which is obviously after Sandy Hook, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I don't know. We should go even further back. I wonder, he may even have voted favorably in some parts, anyway, of the assault weapons ban back in '94, although that was a pretty contentious thing among the
he voted for regulation of semi-automatic assault weapons in 1994.
There you go.
He voted for the Brady handgun bill.
Yes.
The guy's old enough to be around for those votes.
Yeah. And when the Wikipedia general summary, it only has the more recent ones. But by the way, it does list them as opposing concealed carry. In 2016, one of 4 Republicans to receive a 100% rating from the Brady campaign. So, he's
again,
a bit
just
of an
goes to
oddball.
show there are conservatives and there are conservatives. I'm going to give you the website I've been using to look at his votes.
That will be helpful. Just Facts, damn it. JustFacts.VoteSmart, not damn it.
Yeah.
Okay. But,
Free, unbiased, in-depth information about current officials and candidates.
Sure. That's what I would say about my website, too. I might be wrong, but that was very helpful, and it gives us a better sense of who he is and why he did it. Fred Upton, I imagine, might even have posted a similar record.
He might have, but again, he's retiring, so he's in a different situation.
Shy and
this
retiring.
goes to the point. Well, you can never negotiate with Republicans. They're just going to do that. Well, you can. It depends who you're negotiating with.
They have to be old, apparently. And, we found 10 Republicans. Yes, but we were looking for 10 in the Senate. Oh. All right.
Well, Senate stuff isn't done yet. And so, Cornyn may say no to things like background checks, but he may say yes to things like red flag laws and upping the age. It's not clear. Murphy and Cornyn are still negotiating. Nobody said that they've given up. And, they don't have to come to a conclusion by the end of the week. Everybody laughed at Schumer when he said, I'm not bringing this up right away. That's because he knew that there was some room to negotiate here. So let's see what they come up with.
We will see. And by the way, in case you were going to go ponder Chris Smith again, he is a big promoter of chronic Lyme disease issue. So now you can go back to being upset with him.
Well, Blumenthal does that in Connecticut more than I would like to see.
Okay. Well, so they can get together. See, there's room.
People are complicated, so they must be moderates because,
that must be
on the one hand, they voted for background checks, and on the other hand, they promote chronic Lyme disease and severe abortion restrictions. But when you average them, he's center right.
I guess so. All right. Well, an interesting side trip here.
It's just all I'm saying. So, don't assume in advance you can't negotiate with folks. It depends what your issue is and how you approach them.
Right. You won't find help from him on abortion.
Right. Unlike the Senate, which is run with an iron fist by McConnell, McCarthy really didn't have a lot of control over his caucus, so it's not like you have to go to McCarthy and get permission to do this.
That's true, too. And, I wonder what people think of McCarthy. If they've been there for 40-something years, like, can they really just roll their eyes at McCarthy coming along telling them,
and mouth, oh, my God.
Yeah, right. And rock back. All right. Well, now we know more about Chris Smith than we
Well,
ever
it's interesting.
wanted to.
Again, New Jersey's interesting, too. It's got a mix of things. Like most, you think of New York as a blue state, but, have you ever been to upstate New York?
Yes, and that's where the red people are hiding. Red voting people. I don't know. Anyway, point is they are a mixed bag and they're odd people. Chris Smith, I also remember a great activist on international human rights issues for various reasons, and very frequently a cooperator with Democrats on that front.
Right. So interesting piece in the Atlantic. Putting armed veterans into schools is madness. Politicians need to stop turning to the military to solve every problem. Let me explain why.
That's a good point.
And this is why by Andrew Exum.
All right, Andrew. Well done.
For those of you who are not yourselves veterans, who do not work in the U.S. government or at a major American corporation, let me assure you the entire hiring process in both the private and public sector is geared toward hiring military veterans. And why should it not be? We work hard. We're used to carrying out orders that don't add up and generally have a well-developed sense of humor about life and our own mortality.
All right.
So you should be working on COVID issues.
Yes, but...
Right? Corporations fall over themselves to hire veterans. And the federal government explicitly favors military veterans in hiring. So in a country with an overall unemployment rate of 3.6, how many of us do you think are unemployed? I drop my kids off at school most mornings, but I also have a job. I do not have the time to run inside and clear all the classrooms with a firearm, although I'm sure my kids and their friends would think it hilarious to watch me doing so with my trusty 28-gauge shotgun, saving them from any hostile quail found lurking under their desk. The only veterans who have the time to do this are those veterans who are mentally or physically disabled from their service or veterans who have otherwise failed to transition back to civilian life. And many, I would respectfully argue, are the very last people you want walking around schools with firearms.
Yeah.
So he makes an interesting point. Look, the only veterans who are going to take this job are unemployed veterans. And if they're unemployed, given the favoritism that veterans get in the employment line,
that's a good point.
You don't necessarily want those people.
Yeah. Well, it stands right along the numbers game, which people say, "Oh, we'll put veterans," or some has suggested National Guard troops in the schools, and it's like that is a lot of schools. I don't think you're thinking about the number of people you need to find. You're going to have to find 500,000 personnel to.
Right.
I
suspect, he writes, that when a lot of policymakers think of veterans, they think of us like Rambo from the movie First Blood or Kane from the television show Kung Fu, wandering the country aimlessly. Sure. They think of us as lost. They think of us as victims. Put bluntly, most of us veterans have our crap together. We're husbands, we're wives, fathers and mothers, Little League coaches, and we're more likely to be employed than the rest of you. So stop suggesting we solve problems that aren't in our job jar.
Yeah, job jar. Yep. Well, true. Good point for a number of reasons. Something I didn't really think about.
It's my job. Make you think about things you normally don't think about.
Yeah. Well, well done there. And well done, Andrew. Andrew who? What was it?
Exum.
Exum. Okay, Andrew. Exum. I should say it out loud so I remember.
Okay. And again, always worrying that I won't have enough material for my 20-minute segment that generally lasts an hour.
Fool.
You moron. Of course you have.
Well, okay.
Well, what the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
Just keep talking.
Take up a whole hour.
Come on, Stork. All right, well.
Chief Justice John Roberts facing test of leadership amid tense time at Supreme Court. The Chief Justice has embraced the go-slow approach, but the experts wonder if that's still possible now that the court is a 6-3 conservative majority. They're counting him. I think of it more as a 5-4 court or, or a 5-3-1. 5 still have the majority. And sometimes he sides with the liberals, making it 5-4, and sometimes he's his own thing, 5-3-1. The problem is when it was 4-4-1, he had a tremendous amount of power. And in 5-3-1, you really can't influence anything. But what's happened with the leak is that none of the justices trust each other as Clarence Thomas has informed the world, and the clerks are terrified that they're going to have their phones impounded, and they're the ones that do all the work. And so things grind to a halt. The court is even more dysfunctional than usual. We're not getting opinions. You know, that leaked opinion isn't out yet. Why is that? It's already June. Most of the big opinions come out in May.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be difficult to.
They're taking the approach that the Republicans take with gun reform. You know, hold your breath, and maybe it'll go away.
Oh. There is that option, I guess, but interesting that I think of Roberts almost a little bit like McCarthy in terms of losing control of his caucus, or the body.
Well, Roberts is a lot smarter than McCarthy.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But you're right. The go slow approach, whatever that might even mean, it might be out of his control.
Well, nibble at the Voting Rights Act. Don't
Yeah.
chuck it entirely.
That's
Nibble around
thought.
the edges of Roe, but don't chuck it entirely.
But
that sort of thing.
You can only do that if
Let it sink in that this is the way we're moving, so that it doesn't feel like a revolution.
Right.
Whereas Alito is like, okay, well, let's just
get
throw
all-
everything out and do things the way
done.
we old white men want to. Period, because we can.
Well, you have to be the swing vote to do that, and the sixth conservative vote on the court means there's
Nothing.
no way to do it.
Nothing.
Yeah, well, he
it's
can't put a
like
stop to things. He can't force.
it's like a Susan Collins vote.
I guess so.
When is she the 51st vote? Never.
Yeah.
Never.
good luck to
Absolutely
him,
never.
I guess.
She's the 49th or the 52nd.
Yeah. All right. Well, the Supreme Court, by the way, back in the news also, I should mention that apparently there was somebody stalking around or something. I didn't really read the details of it. An armed guy arrested outside of Brett Kavanaugh's house,
Right.
which I didn't realize was
makes
the problem.
Mitch McCarthy force a vote immediately to protect the justices.
Yeah. Right.
Whereas we'll take our time with everything else that the country
The
actually
kids
needs.
can defend themselves, especially the huskier ones. They can.
Why don't you
rush
just arm the
shooter.
Supreme Court?
Yeah.
What's your problem here?
Either that, or we should appoint. We can expand the Supreme Court and appoint all the school children, K through 12, in this country to the
Only the
Supreme
husky
Court.
ones.
Yeah, and it will protect them there. But yeah, it was very interesting watching him get upset about that. Oh, I've forgotten to run our music, so we'll have to cut out a little earlier. But yeah, arm them. If you're worried about what's going on at Brett Kavanaugh's house, throw him some guns, take out some of the doors, send hopes and prayers. Everything should be okay.
I'll see you at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7
Okay.
Central.
All right, everybody tune in. You make the popcorn and enjoy it. We'll see you next week when all things will have been set right. All right. Thanks very much for sticking with us through the break there. Yeah, everything's back on track now. The music set us back a little bit, but welcome back to the show. Let's finish up. We got another hour to do, and as we often ask ourselves,
What the hell is supposed to do, you
right,
moron?
we got an hour to do, and what are we going to share with you? Well, I don't know. What other things might I say? Here.
It's all
There
there,
we go.
black
How about
and
this
white,
one?
clear as crystal. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Well, it is in black and white. It's in print, of course. You might ask yourself, what's black and white and red all over? And that puzzled me until I was about 9 years old. It's not red. And then, oh, I see what you mean. Now I get the joke. I get jokes. All right, let's see. Let's head over to Pocket and find the things that we want to share. I got a couple of items that I feel like Good Friday... not Good Friday, once again. We don't have to wait for that to come around. But excellent Friday material. And I'm going to hold on to them. And I think you all know who you are. But some contributions to the show that I'm going to have to read myself. That's the tough part of it. But okay. We can hold on to those things for now. Let me add, though, since this... since the topic... the gun topic came up, I thought I might share something that was shared with us, Greg and I, the other day. Our and everybody's good Twitter friend Bosengood, who writes as well over at Daily Kos under a different screen name handle, as we used to call it back in the old days, over at Daily Kos, Bethesda 1971. So if you recognize either of the names, a little bell goes off in your head like the one we start the show with, a little ding. And what was it? So the message on Twitter was that Twitter's Bosengood, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, I have no idea, but Bethesda 1971, for the rest of you who are Daily Coast denizens, saying that my new Twitter name, you know how you change the name that goes along, the display name that goes along with the address, Bosengood. You still have to go to that to send the message to, but now reads as a Twitter name, Woke Mob Against Gun Death. Time to seize the narrative, and tagging both Greg and myself. And I thought, okay, interesting. Tell me more. And then as it turns out, we were told more. Here is Bethesda 1971, as we refer to them on Daily Coast. Seize the narrative. Here's the whole diary. Changing my Twitter name to Woke Mob Against Gun Death. Kind of an in-your-face, throw the term back at them. And yeah, we can, I think, all be proudly part of a woke mob against something as broadly unpopular as gun death. Although in some cases you might say, well, gun death is actually quite popular with Republicans. Yes, other people's gun deaths are quite popular with Republicans. It's their own gun deaths that they reject. But, you know, sometimes those happen. So maybe it is time to seize this narrative. Here, let's see how it's described here in the diary. Part 1, I guess this is going to be long enough that there are Roman numerals involved, but it's not overwhelming. Part 1, the lesson of deplorable. Do you remember Deplorable Jim et al.? 6 years ago, when Hillary Clinton said half of Trump voters were a basket of deplorables. By the way, that was very creatively phrased. Just an interesting combination of words to pick out for describing Trump fans. I mean, vicious scumbag, dirty, traitorous moron, like all those sorts of things. A very florid language. You could be, but basket of deplorables. First of all, deplorable. You know, that's just a $10 word. Fantastic. Basket. What? Why? Exactly. You know, it's you're a Tupperware full of jerk faces. No. A knapsack of basket. All right, basket of deplorables. Really remarkable, and it stuck with us. Anyway, 6 years ago, when Hillary Clinton said half of Trump voters were in a basket of deplorables, Republicans immediately pounced, led by Fox, Rush Limbaugh. Right? And look what happened to him as a result. I think I would say a direct result of his joining this crusade killed him dead. So don't you try it. And don't let that be a warning to the rest of right-wing radio. But Fox leading the way, Rush, and thousands of mini Rushes followed, as usual, by the mainstream media, who used it as exhibit, let's say, 1248, Exhibit 1248, in the already settled trial and conviction of HRC, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Not Human Rights Campaign, as an elitist who looks down on all Trump supporters as deplorable. It was the 2016 version of Obama's 2008 bitter cling comments, right, about guns and religion, which, by the way, has actually aged well in light of recent events. But more on that. Republicans proudly owned Deplorable. Within hours, Etsy had Deplorables merch for sale, including Deplorable t-shirts, keychains, card decals, buttons, pendants, coffee mugs, and even a Deplorable pocket watch, which, quite honestly, I mean, I don't know who you think you're selling that to. The ghost of H.G. Wells or something is going to come back for a Deplorable pocket watch. I don't think clothing even comes with a pocket correctly sized for a pocket watch, but that would be an interesting thing to bring back. It's like something for the J. Peterman catalog, right, from real life, actually, but Seinfeld as well, the urban pocket watch with this urban sombrero. Anyway, the greatest impact may have been on Twitter. Overnight, Twitter names MAGA, alt-right, or Jim became Deplorable MAGA, Deplorable Jim, or Deplorable alt-right. I am a deplorable was the 2016 I am Spartacus. Some continue now like Ultra MAGA deplorable. Part 2 here, co-opting the woke mob narrative. What if we did the same, essentially? The phrase woke mob is everywhere, not just from the right, but also from their mainstream media enablers. A Google search for, quote, woke mob shows about 12,000 results in just the last month. In this narrative, every Democrat is responsible for every supposed excess, and that in quotes, from the left, including, or rather leading to a barrage of hysterical headlines. The woke mob wants to defund the police. The woke mob wants to force you to say Latinx, which we really don't. And we've been quite adamant about that. The woke mob wants your white kid to hate himself. Even though zero, or near zero anyway, elected Democrats actually hold these positions. The woke mob can also be both-siderism. Have you had people tell you things like, I'm not crazy about Republicans, but the woke mob rules the Democrats? Or, I don't like Trump, but didn't some woke mob kids cancel a speaker at a college? What if instead of running from or explaining away the woke mob label, we turned it around like they did with deplorable, serving two purposes? It's workable and a good idea, too. Blunting the woke mob meme and reminding and informing people they agree with Democrats on most issues. After all, don't large majorities of Americans agree with these positions of the woke mob? Woke mob for kids surviving school. Woke mob for women controlling their bodies. Woke mob against domestic terrorism. Woke mob for marrying whom you love. Woke mob against insurrection and treason, against climate death, background checks, $20 minimum wage, well, not against, but for background checks, for $20 minimum wage, against price gouging, against forced birth. It's true. There's an opportunity there. I always liked to say, back when I was in advertising and writing copy for ads, I always said that if you find a weakness in your product or whatever you're advertising, I say run straight at it. I don't give them a chance to focus on it. Refocus them or refocus for them, I say. Well, anyway, I always thought that this would work. And quite honestly, I guess my biggest regret on Twitter, and it's not a big regret in life because life isn't Twitter, but I used to, something I do around the house all the time, and occasionally did on Twitter in the early days, and I always wish I had done it just whenever there was really literally nothing going on, I would check on Twitter. There's obviously were things going on, but I wasn't interested in what was going on. And I said, I can't find anything to engage in. Or there was so much going on that it was impossible to digest at all. Either one of those two extremes. I used to think, to myself, and I walk around the house saying, and I'd look at what was going on and say, oh my God, Hitler, socialism, just everything at the time, 2010 or so. All the Tea Party rallies, they would get out there and they'd draw up Hitler mustaches on Obama and scream about socialism. And though I never did what I was thinking of doing, which was to go on Twitter all the time and saying, oh my God, someone please stop all the Hitler and the socialisms. I did do it a little bit more with socialism, and a lot of people did, and just point to everything and say, oh my God, someone please stop the socialisms. And it turned it into a bit of a joke at first, and made the stupid Hitler comparisons and stupid socialism comparisons look, frankly, very stupid. And then, of course, it also cleared the field for people to actually start saying that they were proudly socialists or democratic socialists again. And, it wasn't necessarily the greatest results, politically speaking, but it did disarm a lot of the attack. And there's something to that theory that is, I think, being tapped into here. All right, so that's why we've got the Twitter name change, Woke Mob Against Gun Death. So you can also become active in the woke mob getting out the youth vote by volunteering or contributing to groups like the Nonpartisan Civics Center. There's a nice embedded tweet from them with a little QR code and everything, so you can find their website. That's the explanation And another plea, by the way, also to consider contributing to the nonpartisan civic influencers for college students. Interesting approach to getting a little something extra done in all this. But a great idea, and certainly I'm a big supporter of the theory of taking away the power, the sting of their attacks by just running straight at it and adopting it and co-opting it. And there have been several models demonstrating the power and the possibility of all that. So I agree. All right, so I just wanted to kind of make you aware of that. And you might think about doing something similar, or whether it's changing your Twitter handle or not, I don't know. But certainly adding it to your rhetorical bag of tricks might be wise. All right, so Greg had mentioned that Mark Meadows and his texts are likely to be prominently on display during the committee hearings tonight. Sitting in pocket for the last couple of days since June 2nd has been the CNN reporting on the various texts that are available, and there's a vast treasure trove of them. In this piece here, whoops, where'd the headline go? Read the Meadows text messages from January 6th. The only byline here is by CNN, I guess, because it's just a compilation of other people's texts. They didn't feel comfortable sticking an actual byline on it, and maybe that many people worked on them. They must have split it up among, 15, 20, who knows how many people reading through them, because there were 2,319 of them, according to the story. These are all the texts obtained by CNN that former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows handed over to the January 6th committee that were sent and received between Election Day 2020 and President Joe Biden's inauguration, including more than 150 of them on January 6th alone. Meadows' texts, which he selectively provided to the panel, by the way, and there's a linked article there. I wonder what the selection process was. Let's see, January 6th committee gets Meadows text emails with wide range of people while attack was underway. That was back in December 9th of 2021. So not that long ago, but at any rate, let's read some of these texts. Meadows' texts, which he selectively provided to the panel, show that even those closest to former President Donald Trump believed he had the power to stop the violence in real time. That's pretty interesting, too. The fact that they believed that he had the ability to do it and didn't is pretty much all you need to know. But they'll be making that case tonight. In fact, I just saw somebody the other day saying, you might notice that, for instance, when Kevin McCarthy, in the moment, was in fact frightened and worried about the attacks, and he wanted them to stop. Now he, of course, says, no, they were great and they were just tourists and the whole thing is overblown. But at the time, when he was really worried for his own safety and perhaps the safety of others, and wanted the attacks to stop, he didn't call information and say, can I have the number for Antifa, or send me the woke mob's telephone number, or Black Lives Matter, as they love to blame it on too. He called Donald Trump because he knew Donald Trump actually was driving this thing. Now, he didn't get any help from Donald Trump, so it was ineffective in that sense. But the fact that he knew to call him is evidence of how widespread the knowledge was, even among Republicans, who was doing this. All right, well, anyway, here's a minute-by-minute timeline of the notable text messages that Meadows sent and received on January 5th and 6th, which have been verified by CNN. The texts include messages from former White House officials, Meadows' associates, and Republican members of Congress, as well as Trump's oldest son. There are also numerous texts from reporters at news organizations such as the New York Times, Politico, Bloomberg, CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox News, and CNN. And a note, CNN has removed personal information from the text. Errors in spelling and grammar reflect the messages as they were sent, which in some cases include profanity. So we can be excited about that and pull out our beep sound effect and use it to great effect, though I wasn't able to get it in there in time for Greg today. But hey, fun stuff. All right, January 5th. let's look at some of the January 5th texts. At 2:30 p.m. from Representative Murdery Trader Green to Mark Meadows, which, by the way, let me remind you, January 5th, 2021. This is a text conversation with the White House Chief of Staff, the guy, as Greg reminded us, who's ostensibly actually running the country, doing the nuts and bolts day-to-day running of the country at the behest of the President of the United States. Arguably like the second, perhaps most powerful or most important person in the country, and given our position in the world, therefore the world, is having a text conversation. Well, it does say right at the beginning, Representative, and they use her real name here, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she has been Representative Greene for all of 2 days at this point. She was sworn in January 3rd, 2021, and she's in in cahoots for a coup with the White House Chief of Staff 2 days later. I mean, she's got no record, no reason at all for the White House Chief of Staff to be paying any attention to her. The reason he's paying attention to her is that she's got a track record of being a QAnon wackadoodle, capable of being talked into wielding a gun to, who knows what, be an insider and push Democrats back out in the hall for the mob to kill or something like that. There's no reason in the world to be in conversation, even now, with Murdery Trader Green. But certainly on January 5th, that's a ridiculous waste of time for the White House Chief of Staff. So what's the text? A Murdery Trader Green texting to Mark Meadows. Last night, Senator Graham told me that if I found 100 names of dead voters in Georgia, that he would object. I have 100 dead voter names. No, you don't, but whatever. And Graham was trying to get rid of you. Anyway, 2:30 p.m. Again, she tweets him, tell President Trump. I guess this is part of the whole conversation. So I've got 100 dead voter names. Tell President Trump. Send them to him, says Meadows back to Murdery Trader Green, which, it's pretty dismissive. Like, well, then send them to him, if you have the names. I don't care, really. I'm just sort of humoring you. A minute later, Meadows says to her, do you have Senator Graham's contact? She says, I do. And his cell? He says, yes. And then that's the end of the conversation. So it's a brilliant conversation. But, I mean, essentially, it's like, last night, Senator Graham told me if I found 100 names of dead voters in Georgia, he would object. I have the 100 names. And it's kind of funny because really, now that I've read through this thing, you can see that Meadows is like, well, then you should tell Senator Graham. I mean, duh. He said if I had 100 names that he would object. Well, then effing tell him that you have 100 names. Don't tell me. She says, of course, tell President Trump, because she wants to be like famous and known to Trump and be a big part. She knows that something's going to happen the next day and she wants to be a part of it. Now, of course, she says, well, nothing to do with it. Why would you tell Trump? I mean, look at what your text says, right? Something important in my mind, even though it was a blow-off, was told to me by Senator Graham. Well, then, if you have an answer for Senator Graham, give it to Senator Graham. No, tell President Trump. All right, fine, whatever. I mean, it's interesting to see. I guess it's only worth repeating in the hearings if Meadows was actually excited by that and tells Trump. Although I guess at this point it might be an interesting question to say, Senator Graham, did she send it to you? And I'm sure he would say no. He'll deny it whether she sent it or not. But she probably didn't, because she didn't really want Senator Graham's help. She wanted President Trump to notice her. So anyway, this is one of several examples. Here's another one starting at 10:29 p.m. Sean Hannity texting Mark Meadows, 10:29 p.m. the day before, January 5th. I am very worried about the next 48 hours. Pence pressure, White House counsel will leave. And then, for whatever reason, he waits. This is interesting. So he sends those two things at 10:29. He's, I guess, trying to warn Mark Meadows, yeah, Pence isn't going to do this thing. The White House counsel will leave. You'll end up looking ridiculous. And then nothing. And then Almost an hour later, 10:18 p.m., Hannity texts, "Sorry, I can't talk right now. On with boss." But there's no, maybe there's a text the other direction that Meadows doesn't disclose, but otherwise, well, who cares that you can't talk? Nobody asked you to talk. 10:27 p.m., Representative Jim Jordan to Mark Meadows. On January 6th, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence, as President of the Senate, should call out all electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all. He's basically texting him the brief version of the Eastman memo, and goes on and says, in accordance with guidance from our founding father, Alexander Hamilton, and judicial precedents, which is the wrong word, no legislative act, wrote Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78, contrary to the Constitution can be valid. This isn't the legislative act, of course. The court in Hubbard v. Lowe reinforced this truth, that an unconstitutional statute is not a law at all, is a proposition no longer open to discussion, with some citations. Following this rationale, an unconstitutionally appointed elector, like an unconstitutionally enacted statute, is no elector at all. Enormous logical leap. I get the parallel, but there's nothing here that would connect the two. No legislative act that's unconstitutional can be valid. Okay, I understand that, but we all understand that there's a concept of judicial review that's got a 200-year plus history in this country. So therefore, something electors. No, there's no something that. It's just you can make an argument about why the selection of a certain elector is invalid, but what are we saying? An unconstitutionally appointed elector. Electors are explicitly named in the Constitution, not the individual electors, obviously, but there's constitutional authority for selecting electors. It's left to the states. The states said we'll do it by having an election in the state. They had an election in the state. The electors were chosen. There's nothing unconstitutional about it. So, I don't know. It's just an example of the foolishness that they're going, and there's no answer from Meadows that's provided here anyway. But he's getting texts from Katrina Pearson in the morning of January 6th. Good morning, praying for you, praying for the president, and praying that I get through the day. Hopefully this latest nightmare will yield something positive. I wonder why she's worried about making it through the day. Without getting arrested, without getting killed, what? Meadows is texting. I guess he's returning the text from Jim Jordan next morning. I have pushed for this, not sure it's going to happen, and it isn't. Let's see. Meadows is texting Mo Brooks saying you're speaking this morning. Let's see. He's texting to David Perdue, any hope, my friend? I guess of objections in the Senate. Dana Bash to Mark Meadows. What is Trump doing to Pence? Question mark, exclamation point, at 9:21 a.m. Let's see. So who else is talking with him? David Perdue. Mo Brooks, Katrina Pearson, as we mentioned. Jason Miller, also in on the conversation here is Bill Stepien, Hope Hicks, Dan Scavino, Ivanka, and Jared. Let's see. And then Miller he's sending them FYI, and then a link to Twitter from Josh Kraushaar, who says what? Let's see. Emotions running high among McConnell-aligned Republicans early Wednesday a.m. after reality of what transpired in Georgia settled in. I guess the special elections for the Senate there in Georgia. May be the heat of the moment, but mood is for declaring war on Team Trump. Want to marginalize Trump as they marginalized Steve Bannon in 2017. So that's the FYI from Jason Miller, letting everybody know that there's danger lurking for Team Trump. All right, so other names involved here. Is it Mario Parker? I don't even know who that is, as a matter of fact. Well, maybe we'll find out today. Jim Acosta saying, hey, are you going to do something about the violence here? Kristen Welker, Dan Bishop on board here, also texting to him. Murdery Trader Green once again. Mark, I was just told there is an active shooter on the first floor of the Capitol. Please tell the president to calm people. This isn't the way to solve anything. So she, too, knows exactly who's responsible. Laura Ingram is in here. Carlton Huffman, who, to Mark Meadows, who says, you've earned a special place in infamy for the events of today, and if you're the Christian you claim to be in your heart, you know that. So, an appeal to God on that one. Didn't work. Mick Mulvaney is tweeting him. Whoops, I'm a little early for that. Let's see if we can... Oh, look at that. It'll stop instantly. All right, well, anyway, here's when the music is supposed to start. That was very interesting. That makes it sound so professional. Mick Mulvaney tweeting him or texting him to say, you got to stop this stuff. Michael Scheer doing the same. Representative Barry Loudermilk. It's really bad up here on the Hill. They have breached the Capitol. Jake Sherman also making a plea. Representative Will Timmons. Mario Parker shows up again. I think we're all familiar with most of the names. Rebecca Ballhaus in here as well. Donald Trump Jr. making an appearance. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. As I'm scanning through it, I'm considering that it's just really best at this point that we let the narrative be explained. I was just sort of hoping to call out any names that I had missed there, and all it's really making me do is get more frustrated with Murdery Trader Green. It's very interesting that she tweets that one, or the texts that one message of, we really need to, it's getting bad here. I heard there's an active shooter. This is not the way, yada, yada. And then by almost 4 p.m., she's now texting him, Mark, we don't think these attackers are our people. We think they are Antifa, dressed like Trump supporters. She's such a dope. So she switches theories during the day, and all of them are pretty dumb. It's just sort of interesting to see all the other people chiming in here. Here's Louis Gohmert saying, Capitol Police told me last night they'd been warned that today there would be a lot of Antifa dressed in red Trump shirts and hats and would likely get violent. Good that Trump denounces violence, but could add and, well, demand justice for those who became violent, and we'll get to the bottom of what group they're with. Well, we've gotten there. And he can't stand it anymore. And, of course, now you not only should we be calling off all the investigation, but, gosh, it's gotten so you can't even lie to Congress in this country. Louis Gohmert. All right, well, it's pretty amazing. But it made me think about something else that I read in skimming through yesterday's discussion of, well, the Peter Baker piece. Now that we're all angry at Peter Baker, on how Jared Kushner washed his hands, quote unquote, washed his hands of Donald Trump before January 6th. And we didn't make it very far into the article, I don't think, before we called it quits. For a while we discussed some other aspects of it. But as I was skimming down through it, I saw something that I thought was really interesting. Maybe we'll pick up a little further on down in the article. But Hope Hicks makes an appearance, and I always find that interesting. Hope Hicks, how does she do it? And some of the ways she does it, I guess, is in convincing everybody that she was the level-headed one in all of this. Mr. Kushner's decision to withdraw from the most consequential moment of the Trump presidency left few effective counterweights to the plotters seeking to subvert the will of the voters to hang on to power. That implies, of course, that he was an effective counterweight himself, which we just blew up a few sentences earlier when we were reading this yesterday, finally exploding the myth that Kushner was going to be a moderating force on a president who wouldn't be moderated. Right. Well, they're still believing it. With him gone, there are few counterweights, effective counterweights at that. Well, there never were any, and you never were one yourself. While the president's son-in-law had arguably been the most influential advisor to the president through 4 years, weighing in at times and carefully cultivating his reputation, he chose at that pivotal moment to focus instead on his personal project of Middle East diplomacy, which was really the bagman job, going around laying the groundwork for getting his private equity fund, the coffers filled from Middle East the Middle Eastern ultra wealthy. We're going to fill his pockets. He returned to the region to meet with figures who would also be helpful to him later in making money after leaving the White House, even though he laid all the groundwork while he was in the White House. That was the whole point. I think we read this yesterday, but the role Mr. Kushner played could come into sharp relief once the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol opens public hearings this week. That's tonight. The committee interviewed Kushner, who otherwise has not spoken at length publicly about the events after the 2020 election, and plans to show video excerpts of his testimony along with Ivanka Trump's. Kushner's activities in his final months in the White House are now coming under scrutiny of another Democratic-run House committee. That would be Carolyn Maloney's House Oversight Committee. Let's see. Oh, and of course, the uncritical reprinting of the claim that Kushner has said that he abided by all legal and ethical guidelines while in public service, when we know very well that the story is that he did not, and that the record is replete with his omissions and errors on that very subject, legal and ethical guidelines, while in public service. Anyway, then, of course, a plug for when their book was going to be released. This is the part where we left off, where Hope Hicks makes her appearance. One of the most striking realizations that emerged from the book research was how many people around Mr. Trump did not believe the election had been stolen, but kept quiet or checked out, which is what Kushner says he did, including White House officials and campaign aides. Hope Hicks, how does she do it? Hope Hicks, one of his closest advisors, told him it was time to move on. Well, Hope doesn't believe in me, Mr. Trump responded bitterly. No, I don't, she replied. That's really quite brilliant. Nobody's convinced me otherwise. She disappeared in the final weeks of the administration. So, interesting. I mean, she bailed, yes, but was she also banished? That's interesting. She disappeared. It's a loaded word, disappeared, among these weirdo fascist types. She was disappeared from the campaign, but yeah, she may have walked out too. I'm not certain which. Kellyanne Conway, the former White House counselor and fierce Trump loyalist, reported in her new book that she told Mr. Trump to accept his loss, maybe, something she did not say publicly at the time. That's important. Even this much-delayed acknowledgement of reality, though, drew a rebuke from Trump, who said she should go back to her crazy husband. He's a really bitter, horrible man. Not her husband. I mean, he may also be, but I don't know. But really, Donald Trump, just years of loyal service, and I value loyalty above everything else. I gotta have loyalty, and he's like the least loyal guy there is. And he'll tell you, I'm the most loyal guy there is. It's really quite incredible. All right, well, let's read a little bit more about what Kushner propaganda he's been handing to Peter Baker. During his 4 years in the White House, Mr. Kushner positioned himself as the measured alter ego to a volatile president. the one who others turned to for help in calming down or reasoning with Mr. Trump when he headed down one erratic path or another. But in fact, Mr. Kushner became strategic in his interventions, having been burned by early efforts that blew up in his face. He focused on personal priorities like criminal justice reform and collecting $2 billion. And he jousted with rivals in a factionalized West Wing while absenting himself at key moments to the frustration of colleagues. Right? When the going gets tough, the rich go skiing is basically what his motto was. Mr. Kushner developed his own technique for handling Mr. Trump. One key, he told others, was feeding the president good news, even if it was in short supply. In fact, Kushner came up with a specific mathematical formula for his peculiar brand of Trump management, 2-to-1. And by the way, I mean, I like that it's sort of cast as a mathematical formula, but it's not much of a formula. Twice as much of one as the other. 2 parts good, 1 part bad. That basically is what he's saying. 2-to-1. Any phone call, any meeting should include this good news to bad news ratio. 2-to-1. Again, not much of a formula. It's about the most basic formula that there is. 1-to-1 is the more basic one. 2-to-1 is the next most basic one. What a mathematician. He would give twice as much upbeat information as grim updates. He similarly made a habit of telling Mr. Trump to add 5 points to any bad poll, rationalizing that traditional surveys missed many Trump voters anyway, part of a common White House practice of telling the president what he wanted to hear regardless of the facts. Even for his son-in-law, though, the president was a demanding boss, not given to showing appreciation. Kushner understood that Trump was never going to call him and say, "You're doing a great job. I just want to thank you for this." Instead, Kushner once explained to an associate his dealings with Trump invariably began with the president saying, "What the hell is going on with this?" Albeit with an earthier expletive, right? So probably, "What the is going on with this?" And we can all guess what that might be. Often in a phone call at 1 or 2 in the morning, having watched dozens of senior officials come and go, Kushner realized the essential element of survival, never forgetting it was Trump's show, Trump's party, and Trump's way. You have to realize you don't make the waves. Kushner regularly advised other officials he makes the waves, and you have to do your best to kind of stay on the surfboard. Kushner the surfer had come to recognize when the waves were too rough, as they were after Election Day 2020. He understood that his father-in-law would not concede right away and would ask for recounts and file lawsuits, but he believed that even if there were some irregularities, it was mainly a way of soothing a wounded ego and explaining defeat. Trump would lash out and make outlandish claims, but eventually accept the reality and move out of the White House, an assumption many Republicans in Washington made, only to discover how far the president was really willing to go. To Kushner, his father-in-law's decision to turn once again to Giuliani was a red flag. As far as Kushner was concerned, Giuliani was an erratic schemer who had already gotten Trump impeached once because of his political intriguing in Ukraine, and nothing good would come of the former mayor's involvement in fighting the election results. But instead of fighting Giuliani for Trump's attention, Kushner opted out entirely, deciding it was time to focus on his own future, one that would no longer involve the White House. As though he really could wash that stain off. He and Ivanka, Ms. Trump, began making plans. They quickly ruled out returning to New York, like Mr. Trump, who had officially become a Florida resident in 2019. They had soured on their former home, just as it had soured on them. Miami, on the other hand, seemed exciting and new. While Trump huddled with Giuliani and others, telling him that he could still win, Kushner and his wife began thinking about where they would live, what schools they could send their 3 children to, and what business ventures they would pursue. They had to be discreet about it. The last thing they wanted to do was make it look as if they were moving on, because that would produce headlines embarrassing to Trump. Indeed, Ivanka Trump would text her father's top advisors that same day, just after the election, and prod them to keep the faith and fight. But she and Mr. Kushner were soon scouting properties in Florida, and within weeks they were buying a $32 million lot formerly owned by the Spanish singer Julio Iglesias on the private island of Indian Creek near Miami, an exclusive haven for a couple dozen wealthy families that tabloids called the Billionaire's Bunker. Where's my Bayraktar when you need it? Anyway, in what remaining time he had in the White House, Kushner wanted to focus on expanding the Abraham Accords, the agreement establishing diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab states, an achievement that he felt validated his whole time in Washington. Two other countries, Morocco and Sudan, signed on to the accords during the period between the election and Mr. Biden's inauguration. Oh, and by the way, then a bunch of them gave him $2 billion. If that's important. As his father-in-law refused to authorize transition cooperation with Biden's incoming team, Kushner quietly began working with aides to the president-elect like Jake Sullivan and Jeffrey Zients, how does he say, Zients, Z-I-E-N-T-S, you probably know him, to prepare for their takeover. And although Trump might not have been thinking about his legacy yet, Kushner was. Thinking legacy, was he? While still in the White House, he began writing a memoir focused on Middle East peacemaking and money collecting. He didn't focus on that part, I guess. In the weeks to come, as Trump would continue to insist that he would remain for a second term, Kushner set about chronicling the first, something to sell, more money. He even took an online master class on how to write a book, taught by the prolific best-selling novelist James Patterson. How to write a book. Boy, oh boy. In the course of a 2-week stretch after the election, he secretly batted out 40,000 words of a first draft. The final version is set to be published in August. It's all about books, kids. It's all books these days. A coming collision comes next. The post-election fraud claims quickly exposed a rift within the Trump family. On the same day, Kushner woke up to declare it was time to move to Miami. His brother-in-law, Donald Trump Jr., was already pushing the president's team to fight to stay in power. He sent a text to Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, who was in our collection, as a matter of fact, outlining a plan to override the verdict of the voters by having Republican legislatures in states won by Biden invalidate the results and send Electoral College voters for Mr. Trump when Congress counted them on January 6th. How much Kushner knew about that at the time remains unclear, but he did not express serious concern about how far the efforts to hang on to power would go. He sent word to Mitch McConnell, the Republican majority leader, that Trump would eventually accept the reality that he lost. We'll get through it. Bear with us, Kushner told Josh Holmes, former chief of staff and campaign manager for McConnell, who would pass along the message. We've got a couple of challenges that have some merit. We'll see how they go, but there's a pretty good chance we come up short. And once the Electoral College voted on December 14th, he suggested that would be the end of it. Trump just needed time to come to terms with his defeat. Well, you were wrong about that. So what a great advisor and moderating influence you are. Why are we writing books about you again? While Kushner was often called the president's shadow chief of staff, the man who held the actual title, Meadows, was actively encouraging the conspiracy theorists seeking to overturn the election, acting less as a gatekeeper than a door opener. Got ahead of myself. Letting practically anybody who wanted to come into the Oval Office. Among them were lawyers and others arguing that the vice president could unilaterally stop Biden from being formally recognized as the winner in his role overseeing the counting of the votes. Pence concluded that he had no such power, and it would be unconstitutional for him to do so, but that did not stop Trump from keeping up the pressure. Finally, seeing the collision that was coming, Mark Short, the vice president's chief of staff, tried to enlist help from Kushner, calling him over the holidays to ask him to get his father-in-law to stand down. Look, can you help us with this? Short asked. But Kushner brushed him off. Look, when Rudy got involved, I stopped being involved, he told Mr. Short. The vice president is a big boy, and if he disagreed with the president on a legal issue, he should bring in his lawyers. I'm too busy working on Middle East peace now, Mark, which he really wasn't. But it's a good excuse. It sounds good. Indeed, in the days leading up to January 6th, Kushner was in the Middle East, brokering a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Qatar to end a 3-year blockade of the small Gulf state. He was on a plane back to Washington when Trump's mob stormed the Capitol. After arriving home in the afternoon, Kushner was in the bathroom with the shower already running and about to jump in when his phone rang. Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican Minority Leader, was on the line asking Kushner to persuade the president to do something. "We need help," McCarthy insisted. Kushner turned off the shower and rushed to the White House. Ivanka Trump had spent much of the day trying to keep her father from going too far. Yeah, she had refused to address the rally on the ellipse, but at the last minute was so concerned by her father's anger toward Pence that she decided to accompany him there in hopes of avoiding a worse clash. Over the following hours, as rioters rampaged through the Capitol, she ran up and down the stairs in the West Wing from her office to the Oval Office, hoping to persuade her father to issue stronger statements calling off the attackers. By the time Kushner finally arrived at the White House, his wife had gotten her father to release a video telling supporters to go home, but even then he repeated his lies about the fraudulent election and expressed solidarity with the rioters, telling them, "We love you, you're very special." Mr. Kushner quickly concluded that there was little more that he could do at this point. "It's too hard. I gotta go." In the days that followed, Kushner tried to broker peace between the president and vice president, because he's a peacemaker. On January 11th, he asked Mr. Short to come to his office. Would the vice president be willing to get together with the president? "He's always willing," Short replied, "but that's not his responsibility to reconcile this relationship. That invitation should come from the other end of the hall." "Well, that's what I'm doing here, Mark," Kushner said. At Kushner's arrangement, Trump and Pence sat down that afternoon with no staff for an hour and a half. Pence reported back to aides that it was somewhat warm, but it was only a bandage over a gaping wound. Because Trump, in personal, face-to-face conflict, not much going on there. So, anyway, on January 20th, Kushner and Ms. Trump attended the farewell ceremony for the outgoing president at Joint Base Andrews and accompanied him on Air Force One to Florida. Trump was heading into exile, preparing to keep waging war on Biden and the system, insisting he really won. Kushner and Ms. Trump would have nothing to do with that. Yes, they did. The next day, 2 moving trucks showed up at their Calorama house to load up the furniture and a Peloton bike for the journey south to a multi-level luxury condo they had rented to live in while waiting for their new mansion to be built. They were moving on to their new life, except they really weren't. So anyway, he's a useless slug who spent the time filling his pockets, but called it negotiating for Middle East peace, and then abandoned the country in its hour of need because he realized there's nothing he could do. But he realized that because his history with Trump had demonstrated to him that there really was never anything he could do, or never anything that Trump would acknowledge, certainly. And he was more or less taking up space. His big triumph was, I'll make it look like there's Middle East peace. You give me $2 billion, and then I'll get out of your way. That's kind of what he accomplished here. So, I don't know. They dress it up as well as they can in book form, but there's really nothing going on here. All right, let's see. A few other things that we can fit in before we take off for the day and get set to count down to the big hearings. Let's see. Where do we want to go with this thing? There's a couple of items that have been waiting for discussion. What could fit? Not really sure. Why don't we go with this one? This is something that's been waiting. We mentioned Bill Barr earlier in the show. Maybe we'll come back to him. Dana Milbank, the Dick Whisperer, has written a column a couple of days ago. Bill Barr's reign of innuendo unmasked. Of course, getting to the bottom of just what Bill Barr did facilitate on behalf of Trump before, trying to wash his hands like Kushner and leave before the big insurrection. But stemming from the big collapse of John Durham's case, Milbank writes, this week, meaning last week, saw the unmasking, get it? Unmasking of former Trump administration Attorney General Bill Barr, and it wasn't pretty. A jury deliberated for just 6 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict acquitting former Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer Michael Sussman, leaving the Barr-appointed special prosecutor John Durham with essentially nothing to show for his years-long attempt to find wrongdoing by the FBI and the Clinton campaign in the Trump-Russia probe. Hours after the jury dismissed Durham's bull, get it, BuzzFeed published a previously secret Justice Department report ordered by Barr, in which Barr's own DOJ concluded that the Obama administration didn't intend to expose the identity of Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn for political purposes or other inappropriate reasons. It was further evidence that another favorite Trump claim enabled by Barr, that Obama officials engaged in illegal unmasking, was bunk. The day after these twin repudiations of Barr's fantasies, the hoaxster explained himself on Fox News by arguing that John Durham's failure in court was in fact triumph. While he did not succeed in getting a conviction from the D.C. jury, Barr said, I think he accomplished something far more important. This is about as convincing as the Washington Nationals saying, well, while we did not succeed in scoring a run for 27 innings, we accomplished something far more important. Okay, in a courtroom, a prosecutor either wins or loses. So, what did Barr think was more important than Durham actually winning his case? The quote says, he crystallized the central role played by the Hillary campaign in launching, as a dirty trick, the whole Russiagate collusion narrative, Barr said, and he exposed really dreadful behavior by the supervisors in the FBI, which, once again, is a Barr specialty, summarizing the results of something somewhat complex, but just stating the opposite of the actual conclusion. I will summarize the Mueller report, which says we did nothing wrong and the whole thing is a hoax. No, it actually says you did lots wrong, and despite the fact that you guys say it's a hoax, it really, really isn't. And he's done the same thing here. Well, our loss was a victory because it proved that the whole thing was a hoax. No, you lost, and the case was about proving that it was a hoax, and you failed to do so. Durham didn't crystallize or expose anything. Milbank continues. He packed his court filings with innuendo, and the jury decided that he hadn't made his case. The only conviction Durham has earned to date was a plea deal with an FBI lawyer over a doctored email. I mean, that's bad, and that wrongdoing was uncovered by the Justice Department's Inspector General, not Durham. But Barr's argument that the innuendo Durham spread is far more important than proving actual wrongdoing unmasks Barr's perverted view of justice. He didn't tap Durham or John Bash, who handled the unmasking probe, primarily to prosecute criminal behavior. He launched the inquiries to tell a political story. Part of this operation is to try to get the real story out, Barr told Fox News, and I have said from the beginning, if we can get convictions, they didn't. If they are achievable, they weren't, then John Durham will achieve them. He didn't. But the other aspect of this is to get the story out. Bringing a case for such a purpose violates Justice Department policy, though. Yeah, it's against Justice Department policy to bring cases that they think they can lose just for telling political stories or setting a narrative. Running Trump's DOJ, Barr was all about telling stories rather than prosecuting wrongdoing. He sat on the Mueller report of the original Russia investigation, instead releasing his own purported summary, which we discussed earlier, that gave a misleading impression of Mueller's findings, to say it mildly. Barr baldly alleged, I think spying did occur against the Trump campaign, but no proof has surfaced. And remember, the John Durham prosecutions were basically about trying to prove that, too. And they failed because it didn't happen. In fulfilling Donald Trump's demands to investigate the Russia investigators and those who allegedly unmasked Flynn, Barr wasn't seeking justice. He now admits that trying to make the case that the FBI acted in bad faith against Trump, as Republicans allege, would have been onerous and a Herculean case and a very hard thing to prove, especially as it didn't happen. Barr was giving justice cover, I suppose, Department of Justice, using the Department of Justice to give cover to the reckless allegations being made by Trump and his allies. Barr made sure the lies had a lengthy head start to leave lasting impressions before any corrective could be issued. Barr made space for Senator Marco Rubio to predict one of the biggest political scandals in American history. for John Cornyn to proclaim a scandal bigger than Watergate, for Rand Paul to claim there was a smoking gun found, for Representative Michael Turner to declare a threat to democracy itself, and for Representative Devin Nunes to allege that Obama officials were unmasking anyone and everyone so that they could leak information to a press that was willing to take that illegal information. Now we know Trump's DOJ, in its own words, had, quote, not found evidence of inappropriate unmasking. And we see Durham's claim of wrongdoing in the Russia probe ending in a swift acquittal. Barr, unmasked, now claims the federal jurors in Durham's case violated their oaths by following political biases. A D.C. jury, he said, is a very favorable jury for anyone named Clinton and the Clinton campaign. Those are the facts of life. There are two standards of law, and we have to struggle with that. It's interesting that he thinks there are two standards of law, and he's on the short end of that one. So now, Barr is trying to discredit the centuries-old American jury system. It's just one more story that he tells to replace the rule of law with the reign of innuendo. That's it. We made it to the end of that piece, but not yet to the end of the week. Friday looms, and of course the big hearings tonight. We'll be discussing those tomorrow, I am sure. Plus getting to a couple of contributions that have been waiting in the wings for some time. And wrapping up the news of the week. For now, though, you need more news? I know where you can go to get some. How about Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. Let's get a flavor for what he's got on tap today. You can tell how partisan the January 6th committee is by the way hardcore arch-conservatives Liz Cheney is a baby-eating representative democracy commie. Okay, love the language there. Now, what about a couple of hints of what's to come in the news roundup? Well, stay tuned for just a second.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Hey, how about this? Brittany Griner's case is tangled up now with that of a lesser-known American also imprisoned in Russia, Paul Whelan. Let's see if we can figure out what that's all about as Justice describes it to us. Plus, let's see, a rebel golf league backed by Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. Wow. Stay tuned.